I was 36 years old, sitting in the same peeling leather chair I'd occupied for nearly a decade at Vanguard Solutions when I heard the words, for the 13th time, "We've chosen someone else." Derek. That was the name on the folder slid across the polished glass table. I didn't need to open it, I already knew. Derek, who had joined only 8 months ago, who still asked me to explain his own project timelines, had just been promoted to the position I had earned over and over again. For a split second, I thought I'd cry. But then I laughed. Not a sweet, polite laugh. I mean a sharp, guttural laugh that startled my manager Dan so hard he actually recoiled. "Something funny?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, still laughing. "I guess I finally get the joke. I'm the damn punchline." His smile twitched, then faded. And just like that, something cracked. 13 rejections. 13 versions of just not now, maybe next quarter you're on the list. 13 times watching men with half my experience and none of my outcomes slide into the office I decorated in my head 100 times. I had led crisis projects, saved client accounts, trained entire teams, and pulled this company back from the edge more times than I could count. And yet, here I was, congratulating Derek as he high-fived coworkers for his big win. My hands clenched into fists in my lap. Not out of rage, out of clarity. Something shifted inside me. Not the kind of shift where you scream or throw things. The quiet kind, cold, final. The kind of shift that says you will never let them do this to you again. That night, I called my cousin April, who works in labor law, and I told her everything. By the time we hung up, I had no tears left, only resolve. This wasn't going to be a tantrum. It was going to be a strategy. My name is Grace. I was done begging for a seat at the table. It was time to build my own damn table. The morning after my call with April, I didn't show up to work broken. I showed up calculated. I smiled at Dan in the hallway like nothing had happened. I brought in donuts for the team. I even congratulated Derek with such genuine warmth that he stammered awkwardly, unsure if I was being real or sarcastic. Let him wonder. That day, I started laying the foundation for what I called my quiet fire. Not a loud exit, not dramatic emails or public blow-ups, just controlled combustion. While they celebrated their newest yes man, I began documenting every single system I'd built, every client workaround I'd invented, every cheat sheet only I knew existed. I called it the blueprint. But unlike before, I wasn't saving it to help them. I was saving it to help me. I knew this company better than the people who founded it. I knew where the cracks were, the ones I'd patched in silence year after year. And now I was going to let those cracks show. Have you ever worked your heart out only to be passed over again and again, while less qualified people climb over you? If that's ever been you, type yes in the comments right now. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more real stories like mine. You're not alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about how much of myself I had given to people who wouldn't even remember my birthday. I thought about how I'd missed family reunions, canceled vacations, and answered emails at midnight, just to be labeled not quite leadership material. I thought about the new hire orientation I'd built from scratch, the onboarding tools I designed, that the company now bragged about in recruitment pitches. They stole my brilliance and gave me breadcrumbs. And I accepted it, thinking one day it would be my time. But there is no time for women like me unless we take it. So I started taking it. I scheduled coffee with former clients. I polished my certifications. I updated my portfolio. No more waiting. No more hoping. I was going to burn their blueprint and build my own empire on the ashes. By the third month of my quiet fire, I'd become a ghost in my own office, visible, present, efficient, but emotionally detached. I stopped reacting when Dan interrupted me in meetings to rephrase my points as his own. I didn't flinch when Derek, now flaunting his lead strategist title, asked me to proof his presentations, ones I used to write from scratch, when he couldn't tell a dashboard from a disaster. Instead, I documented everything. Every time a client called me directly. Every time I cleaned up someone else's mess. Every time my systems saved their crumbling timelines. I built what I now call the leverage file. And it grew fast. But the real pivot came when I met with Madison Chen, a former colleague who'd left our company to start her own firm. Over coffee in a quiet corner cafe, she asked, "What are you still doing there?" Isla. I didn't have an answer. I had excuses. Benefits. Stability. The illusion of loyalty. But not a real answer. Madison looked at me and said, "They're eating your brilliance and calling it their success. That's not stability, it's starvation." That hit me hard. I went home that night and mapped out a 6-month exit plan broken into phases. Phase 1, make myself even more indispensable, counterintuitive but essential. I volunteered for the toughest projects. I positioned myself as the only one who could untangle the most complex client issues. I didn't sabotage a thing. I just let the truth speak for itself. They needed me, more than I ever needed them. Phase 2, I reached out to 2 clients who I knew were unhappy. I didn't pitch anything, I just listened, offered insights, and let them see who the real brain behind the curtain was. By month 4, I had quietly registered my own LLC, Oak and Iron Consulting. It wasn't public yet, just a shell. But it was mine. The name made me feel strong, unbreakable, rooted. I still walked the halls of that office every day, but with a secret. A secret that glowed beneath my skin like armor. They thought they owned me. They thought they'd buried me under 12 rejections. But they didn't realize I was using those rejections as stairs. And I was almost at the top. It was exactly 6:45 a.m. on a rainy Thursday when everything changed. I walked into the office umbrella, dripping heart calm. I'd been expecting it, but it still hit like a slap the announcement email. We are thrilled to welcome Brandon Marks as our newest senior project director. Brandon, the guy who once forgot to mute himself during a client call and said Isla will clean it up later, she always does. The guy whose biggest claim to fame was planning our office trivia night. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stared at the screen as something inside me clicked into place. They weren't just blind, they were willfully blind. And that, right there, was my last straw. I opened my private digital notebook, added the announcement as evidence, then closed my laptop with finality. Later that day, Derek made the mistake of cornering me by the coffee machine. Tough break, huh? But keep grinding, Isla. Your time will come. His words were syrupy, but his eyes glinted with smugness. I gave him the most dangerous thing a woman can give in corporate America, a smile that meant war. I replied simply, "Sure, Derek. Thanks for the pep talk." What I didn't tell him was that I had already drafted my resignation letter. I was waiting not for a better offer, not for a dramatic moment, but for the perfect timing. It was coming. In the meantime, I started Phase 3 soft exits. I had informal coffees with 3 potential clients, 2 of whom had recently hinted at frustrations with our firm. I didn't solicit. I simply asked questions, listened, and let them draw their own conclusions. I sent friendly follow-up emails, professional, polished, planting seeds. And now, here's where you come in. Have you ever had to play the long game at work just to earn what you already deserved? If so, comment yes below and hit that subscribe button. We need each other in this space. By the end of that week, I'd secured verbal interest from both clients and finalized my business website in secret. I wasn't quitting in anger. I was rising with strategy. And when the day came, they wouldn't know what hit them. I spent the next 6 weeks perfecting my escape with the precision of someone who'd been underestimated for far too long. While the leadership team congratulated themselves on hiring Brandon, who, by the way, once asked me how to forward an email, I was quietly becoming the architect of my own future. I upgraded my digital notebook into what I called the leverage file. It held every client success I'd delivered, every custom dashboard I'd built, and every time I'd cleaned up the messes made by men who didn't even know how the back-end systems worked. But I wasn't collecting data for revenge, I was preparing for independence. Each morning, I arrived early, not to prove anything anymore, but to slip into meeting rooms before they were used, where I could take notes, scan printed materials, and track internal shifts. I didn't steal secrets. I simply documented what I had created with my own labor, all of which they would lose access to the moment I walked out. Then came Phase 4 emotional detachment. I stopped reacting to the daily slights. When my idea was pitched by Brandon as his own, I smiled. When I was left out of a strategy meeting, I offered to take notes afterward. They thought I was compliant. What they didn't know was that I was focused. By month 2, I'd secured a consultation agreement with a mid-size firm that admired my work ethic from a previous collaboration. They didn't know I was leaving yet, but they wanted someone like Isla. I smiled when I read that email. Someone like me? No. You'll get me, fully, on my terms. At home, my apartment turned into a quiet war room. Whiteboards, financial plans, calls with my lawyer about setting up my LLC. I wasn't just exiting. I was building something they'd never be able to replicate because they never understood the heart that made it work in the first place. And on the morning of my 32nd birthday, with a lavender latte in hand and a calm I hadn't felt in years, I printed my resignation letter. My plan was set. The clock was ticking. And Paragon. They were about to realize who really built their success. I handed in my resignation on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks before the next quarterly client review. No fanfare. Just a printed letter placed gently on Elliot's polished desk while he was still sipping his overpriced espresso. He glanced at it confused. Isla, what's this? I met his eyes and smiled. It's my notice. I'm leaving in 14 days. The silence that followed was delicious. Elliot blinked like I'd spoken in another language. You can't be serious. We have 3 major rollouts this month. You're the lead on all of them. I nodded. That's correct. But I won't be here. The panic flickered behind his eyes. Then the bargaining began. Is this about the promotion? We can talk. I was planning to revisit it next quarter. That was the moment I realized he still didn't get it. This wasn't about a title anymore. It was about dignity. By the end of the day, the leadership team had called me into a special meeting. Brandon was there, looking stunned. They offered me a 20% raise, then a 30%, then a jump to senior director with flexible hours. I declined each one, calm and clear. You had 3 years, I said softly. 3 years to see my value without forcing me to scream for it. Elliot scoffed. You're making a mistake. You won't last 6 months on your own. I just smiled. Then you have nothing to worry about. The next morning, the fallout began. Clients started calling not the company line, but me directly. Are you leaving? Because if you go, we need to reconsider our agreement. Elliot tried to downplay it, but the damage was done. One by one, they realized I wasn't just a cog in the system. I was the system. The client trust, the delivery efficiency, the late-night problem-solving that had been me all along. By the end of the week, they offered me equity, a seat at the table I had built. But it was too late. I didn't want their table anymore. I was building my own. And the best part, they'd handed me every tool I needed to do it. All while they watched, convinced I'd never walk away. But I had already gone. 6 months after I walked out of that glass-walled prison, I was sitting in the sunlit corner of my new office, the one with my name on the door, and no invisible ceiling above me, when I got the call. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. Isla, the voice said, it's Brandon. There was hesitation, regret, maybe even shame. We've lost 5 clients. Elliot was asked to step down. Things are falling apart. We want you back. Director level. Name your price. Please. I looked out at the city skyline. I'd once only dreamed of reaching my heart steady. I appreciate the offer, I said, calm but firm, but I'm not interested in rebuilding a house that was never meant to keep me warm. That conversation marked a full-circle moment for me, not revenge, but redemption. I'd built something real, honest, mine. Clarity Lane, my boutique consulting firm, now had 7 employees, all of them people who had once been overlooked just like I had, people who brought heart and hunger to their work, and finally had a place to let it shine. I even hired Kirsten, the very woman who once benefited from the system that ignored me. Turns out she wasn't the enemy. The system was. And if you're watching this thinking, that could be me, it can. You don't need their seat at the table when you're capable of building your own. You don't need to wait for validation from people who never intended to see you. If you've ever been told you were replaceable, invisible, or just not ready, say yes in the comments, hit that subscribe button. and join a community that knows your worth. Because sometimes the best kind of revenge is never looking back. Fee.